It's easy to dream the big thing, and it's maybe even easy to line out the steps that it would take to accomplish the big thing, but it's much harder for us to stick with the little things that need to happen in order for the big thing to come to fruition. And so it's our inability to focus on the little things, not our inability to focus on the big thing, that doesn't make the big thing happen. Hello, and welcome to Thinking Out Loud. I'm your co-host, Nathan Rittenhouse.
And I'm your co-host, Cameron McAllister.
I hope everyone's new year is off to a wonderful start. Cameron, quick pop quiz. Well, this is just a funny thing. Do you know what we were talking about this time last year?
I think, was it 3 cheers for New Year's resolutions or something along those lines?
Probably something along that. Another one that was happening around this time last year was pray for Damar Hamlin.
Oh, wow.
Remember that? And it was like this whole big thing all over the place. And we're like, you know what? In a year, nobody's going to be talking about this. I put a note on my calendar for a year from when we had that conversation, and I saw that pop up as a reminder. So I hope all of you are still praying for Damar Hamlin out there. But yeah, just to show you how something that was, it was a serious thing, but it was a really, really, really big deal in the news. And I bet very few of you listening to this thought of this a year later when you woke up this morning. So let that be a reminder that sometimes the things that are really, really big deals in our lives, in our day, are important, but they are not life-changing, perhaps, for us. And I'm not saying that in a callous way toward Damar or anything like that, just a fact of how the news cycle can get captivated by something, and then it disappears. And so in some ways that's great. It's good that some things disappear from our attention span, and other times that's a shame on us kind of thing for forgetting about some important things that are happening in the world. So anyway, with that cheery note, let's talk about the new year without talking about resolutions. So I had this thought.
Yes.
First time ever, that most of the time when we're beginning a new year, I think people are dreaming about big things, or, it's always kind of the same categories of resolutions, but it's often terms of like, I've got a big important thing to do this year, or we kind of schedule our lives around the big important things to do. And it just struck me as interesting that we use big and important together. Like, have you ever, or should we use more like, I have this little really important thing to do? Because this is a convoluted thought, but let me try to hit it from a couple different angles. So I was running an errand with my daughter for somebody, and from our perspective, it was a very small thing. Like, took less than an hour. We were able to go and do it well within our means and capabilities. But for the other person, it turned out that it was a very big event in their life. And for us, it was just a simple, like, something you wouldn't even mention. And so it was a very little thing from our perspective, but it was a very big thing in the other person's life. And so it was a little important thing to do, not a big important thing to do. And so it's just weird. Like, we live in a world where I think we're always striving to, like, what's the big important thing I need to be doing? And the phrase, a little important thing that I need to do, doesn't always register in my mind, I think, or in our minds collectively. And part of this also stemming from the fact that I just wrote a to-do list the other night for, like, okay, now that we're back from the holidays and my to-do list has 64 things on it and I have 155 emails that I need to respond to. That's like 2 weeks of work right there. So those are a lot of little things, but in the grand scheme, I won't even be thinking of them a year from now. And so help me work through this idea of focus. I know also you were watching the movie, what is it? Everywhere All Together at Once, or Everything. What's the title of that?
Everything, everywhere, all at once.
Yeah. So is that just the way that the world actually, like, the way we experience life? And then how do we think about how to focus or make resolutions or resolve or organize our lives when really none of us have the luxury of strategically going and instantaneously doing, oh, I have this big important thing to do. Most of our lives are swallowed and swamped with micro distractions and just the chaos of everyday living. And then we can make a list of, like, 64 hours worth of other stuff we need to do on the side at some point in the next 3 weeks. Is it just me, or does anybody else's life feel like that?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think a few items of context here. I think that for many people, when they hear something like the big things I want to focus on in a new year, that has to do usually with large goals or aspirations. So maybe that's something to do with a career or a relationship. And those are largely centered again on, not always, but they're largely centered on personal dreams and aspirations.
Mm,
And again, a lot of our modern world tends to push us in the direction, especially if you're looking at New Year's kind of folk wisdom these days. A lot of it, has to do with, well, now you need to take absolute responsibility for all of this. You need to make this happen. I've seen multiple voices, for instance, saying it all begins with saying something like, I am where I am today because of all the choices I've made. I'm not a victim. I'm here because of what I've done. And if I want, so if you want to get further or want to climb further or want to get out of your circumstances, so this line of thinking goes, push harder, work harder, take responsibility. So there's a kernel of truth in that. It's good to take responsibility. But to your point, Nathan, so there are, of course, those supposedly small or menial tasks that have to be done. And there are also those distractions that usually come in the form of other persons who need things from you, who need help, who need you to run an errand for them, or perhaps want to run an errand with you, all of that. Now, a certain mindset, and I don't want to go down a slippery slope here immediately, but a certain mindset, if we're not careful, would want to see all of those quote distractions, and I'm putting that in quotes, as something that just is hindering me from getting to where I want to go. Years ago, Nathan, I felt impressed upon me by the Lord. And again, I have to make the joke. Everybody makes this joke. If you're a Presbyterian, it's funny. I'm a Presbyterian. It's hard for God to talk to me. But I felt impressed upon me by the Lord because I was focusing on a lot of writing projects, and focus is very, very important to me, especially when I'm working on a book right now. Focus is very important. And the phrase welcome distractions entered into my head. And the distractions in question were not, this is not scrolling on the internet. These are the people knocking on your office door, or the children walking into your office and wanting to play, or the neighbors knocking on your door needing help. So that's one little angle. It sounded like
mm.
it looked like you had something to say there too, Nathan. I want to.
Well, so I think a big life is made out of all of those things. So, y- y- what's your actual capacity to go out and do something big this year? That's constructive. You can do big things that are destructive very quickly, but to
Sure.
construct a big thing, none of I can't think of anybody who's done a big thing fast. So let's
Right.
say that I've got this big important thing that I want to do in my life, which is improve my career or get in shape or pick any of the other top 10 things that people make resolutions about. None of none of those are possible without, I mean, Cameron, you were joking about how the gym is now swamped with people because it's the beginning of the year. Um, and then that'll
Sure.
taper off because all big things are made out of repeated little important things.
Hmm.
So it just seems like the way in which we conceptualize how our lives, and this we'll have to talk about discipleship in here, and what our goals are, and then what are the steps that are necessary to achieve the big thing. It's easy to dream the big thing, and it's maybe even easy to line out the steps that it would take to accomplish the big thing. But it's much harder for us to stick with the little things that need to happen in order for the big thing to come to fruition. And so it's our inability to focus on the little things, not our inability to focus on the big thing, that doesn't make the big thing happen.
Sure. Well, and so another way to say what you've just said, Nathan, is that big things are always composed of many small things. And the day in, day out of the small, unglamorous, painstaking work is the challenge. But also throw in the fact that life is filled with surprises, not all of them good. And we have to be prepared for, if we think that we can so engineer and construct our path that we can eliminate all distractions and that we can achieve a goal without running into all the traditional human foibles and human limitations and obstacles, then we're harboring, I mean, we're delusional. Or sometimes, though, you will see, you can read this in many biographies of so called great people, or let's put great in quotes. If you read a biography of a lot of people who are celebrated in the United States as innovators, usually these are people who are very wealthy, have created lasting companies, and attained some level of celebrity. This is not always the case. There is a common thread running through a lot of this stuff, and it's not just innovators. It's not just the Steve Jobses. This is also so. I'll pick on my own milieu. This is writers, artists, filmmakers as well. There's a ruthlessness there. So the truth is, you can go pretty far actually if you are very ruthless. You mow people down, and you just aggressively push people out of your way who are getting in your way and who are distracting you. It's perfectly possible to do that. And more disconcertingly, you such efforts often do meet with success. If by success we just mean, you know, attaining for, advancing in your career, making more money, gaining more notoriety. I mean, many great writers whose work I admire, there's a note of hesitation that enters in as I'm reading their work because I've read their biographies and I know how terribly their families suffered. I'll give you a specific example, Nathan. Leo Tolstoy, one of the greatest Russian
Mhm.
novelists, one of the greatest novelists of all time. War and Peace, Anna Karenina. He was a vicious individual with his family and with his children and with his wife up till his dying breath. So we can celebrate the beauty of a work like Anna Karenina while at the same time lamenting what happened behind the scenes. So all that to say, Nathan, as Christians, we're held to a higher standard, and that standard means that we prioritize number one, our service, devotion, and love to God, and then to neighbor.
Mhm.
And the truth is, neighbors are distractions. They will absolutely get in the way of your goals. They will absolutely get in the way of your dreams. And so that's part of what that phrase "welcome distractions" was getting at. So I think we need to take that into account also as we're thinking this through.
As you were saying that, I was thinking of a book that my sister-in-law gave me for Christmas 2 or 3 years ago that was just kind of a look at the daily habits of a whole host, maybe 200 really famous artists, from novelist, produce, the whole gamut of big names. Like if I read out the list of 200 names, everybody listening would know 100 of them. I mean, like
Mhm,
really well known, and their lives were just straight up dumpster fires. I mean, there
mhm.
there was not a single person on that list that I was like, "Boy, I wish my days were like that." Um, it was not a pleasant. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. These are people that achieved big things, but the cost of achieving them was extremely high. And
Well,
maybe you
another
get some
one,
of that,
I
like
mean,
you
and
selling your soul to the devil kind of mentality there
mm,
woven into that. But
sure. Well, what was it in from again from here's my theological neck of the woods, and a thinker I admire in many ways, Jonathan Edwards. How many hours a day did he spend in his study? Was it 8
13,
or it was
yeah,
more than that?
13.
13.
Marsden has it at 13. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I would trust Marsden there. Well, I remember when somebody rattling that off to me with real admiration, and all I thought was his family. My goodness. I
No,
mean,
yeah.
so we I think but here's another part of the context that I think we need to set here, Nathan. This year, I noticed a collective awareness of this more so than I have in years past. But the week of Christmas, there were so many jokes about how, oh, now here we are in the twilight zone of the week of Christmas. All dietary restrictions are out the window. Everything is chaos. There's no structure in my home. The kids go to bed, just whenever we do whatever. I've forgotten all my work passwords. I don't even know my coworkers' names anymore. It's all gone. So that's a pretty, and I felt a little bit of that. That's those all of those the memes and the jokes were describing. Here's the philosophical word for that is quiddity, the just the basic feel and atmosphere of a certain time or place, and that's what it was. So you that's your on ramp to a new year for many people, at least in North America.
See, but I think this is good, and actually, it with the concept of feast in it, it is a reset. So there's nothing special about the difference between December 31st and January 1st. So I don't think New Year's resolutions would even be a category if there wasn't a Christmas holiday. Because what
Mm.
you need is you need to have your schedule disrupted to the point that you have to build a schedule again on the other side of it. And it's not that often unless you have an extended vacation sometime in the summer where you totally set aside your entire routine and then you come back and rebuild your schedule on the other side of it. So I think that's why there
Mm.
is such a temptation to burrow into thinking strategically about your year, but I don't think it would happen if you didn't have Christmas as a holiday break. Um,
Well,
Seems
that
plausible in
leads
my
me.
mind, but
It does. Well, that leads me to an interesting. I don't know. This is a digression. It's thinking out loud, and that's what we do. So times of I'm going to use the word festival. Times of festival or celebration are essential to human life. We need those, and we need those. We need unstructured time. That's a hideous phrase, but yeah, we need times of celebration, times of feasting, and of course, if you celebrate the church calendar, Christmas is not limited just to one day. It's a long celebration. So, but all that to say, Nathan, though, there's a big difference though between celebrating with a beautiful theme, Emmanuel, for instance, God
mhm.
with us, that ties it together, not necessarily with a hard structure, a firm structure. I mean, some celebrations are more structured than others. Let's just be honest, but that gives it significance. That's the word I like. It's imbued with significance versus a time of just time off that's unstructured time.
Right, yeah,
And it's,
of
you're
not
outside the
doing.
church. So that's where Correct. So that's where a lot of the people I'm always got my ears to the ground, and a lot of the people I was listening to who no, were not Christians were saying things like, "Oh, this is an absolute nightmare. I've lost all my motivation to do anything, even to get up and go to the bathroom. I'm supposed to be relaxing right now. I don't feel relaxed. I feel so filled with anxiety. It's just all this nervous energy, and my household is kind of just everything's, all of the it's all chaos." So that's an interesting aspect as well, where if there's celebration, but you have a significance to the celebration versus, okay, it's time off. Everybody have fun right now. There's that kind of pressure that you have when,
Or
like,
else.
just
Yeah.
I think about a family pulling up to Disney, right? All right, everybody have fun now because we spent thousands of dollars on this, and everybody better enjoy themselves. If come rain or shine, there's that intense pressure. You will have a good time, and you're not going to have any other time off. So I think that's an aspect too. A lot of people walk into the new year, and you're right. There's no essential difference between December 31st and January 1st. They walk in from that twilight zone on wobbly feet, feeling terrible because they ate too much, they drank too much, and now they're going. Now we're gonna walk on shaky legs into the gym or into the office, and now we're going to kind of seize the day. I just think that's an important part of the context of what's
Ooh,
happening with a lot of
wait
people
a
around
second.
this time of year.
Yeah, so do you think are New Year's resolutions really a resolution, or are they an atonement for the past 2 weeks?
Yeah, and I think that's a fitting way of putting it. Certainly the I mean, well, because again, you have this is an unstated assumption, I think, or largely unexamined assumption of our culture, is that if you have times of unstructured time or holidays, whatever you want to call them, free time, those are also times of self-indulgence, and maybe
Hmm.
massive self-indulgence. And you owe this to yourself. And this will, this is a great way to just kind of let off that steam. But at the same time, what those activities do is, and especially the older you get, the more they take a spiritual toll always, but they also take a huge physical toll on you, more so the older you get. And so then I do think a lot of people think, all right, how do we expiate for this? It wouldn't be put exactly like that, but certainly, yeah. What
Well,
what
right.
can I do to?
Well, look at the
Yeah.
resolutions. Like, I want to lose weight, probably because you gained weight in the last 2 weeks. I
Mhm.
want to save money, probably because you spent a lot of money in the
Sure.
last 2 weeks. So there's that back and forth there. Maybe that's a distinction between the carnival and the festival, Cameron, is that the
Yeah.
festival is a worshipful thing dedicated to an ideal that is life giving, and the carnival has that carne fleshly
Yeah.
pressure relief valve to it. I know you've talked about this a lot in the past. Um,
Mhm.
so you can just decide whether you had a carnival or a festival by how you feel about it on the other side, perhaps.
Well, yeah, and I mean a key feature to get nerdy for a second. So that's the carnivalesque is Mikhail Bakhtin, famous Russian literary critic, and just a very just a sort of raging, brilliant, eccentric thinker. But he basically the one of the real defining features of the carnival, as he conceives of it, and he draws on a lot of thinkers, medieval and otherwise. But basically, is that it's chaotic. This is a time where the world as we know it, the social order as we know it, is completely reversed. And kings and queens, the royalty are no longer royalty in the carnival. In the spectacle of the carnival, the peasants have the same status as royalty, and so on and so forth. So those roles are reversed. But there's also this chaotic element because the social order is completely undone. So all that to say, I think for many people, I mean, let's face it, this is the United States. Any basically any think of any holiday, usually it just is an excuse to drink, right? From St. Patrick's Day. Come on, I mean, what a travesty is that? You're celebrating St. Patrick. Let's dye the river green and get drunk. Cinco de Mayo. I have no idea what this is about. I know it's 5th of May. Let's get drunk. I mean, so that's a sort of reigning assumption in America that is if you have time off or any kind of holiday, self-indulgence is the order of the day, and it's kind of chaotic. And there seems to be this notion that it's kind of good for you. But then on the other side of that, you have this behavior that seems to acknowledge that wasn't good. I need to undo everything that I did the night before. But also then there's that craving for it. But let's do it right away. I need to use 20 pounds immediately. You're not going to lose 20 pounds immediately. I need to save massive amounts of money immediately. Well, you can't save massive amounts of money immediately if you've just spent irresponsibly for the last, month or so. Again, big things made up of lots of little things.
Yep. So here's part. So I think resolutions are fine, and I think it's great to set things, and then the practice self control that go along with them. So I'm not anti resolution at all, and I think there are some wonderfully strategic things that we can do in this time of the year where we reorder and reorganize and reprioritize, and that's great. Um, One that you should all definitely do is go unsubscribe to at least 5 emails that you routinely get that you never read that you always just delete. So there's my little encouragement. Unsubscribe from some emails when you finish this podcast. Um, Simple things in life, really. No, what so I guess part of what struck me about this is I often like to ask, particularly young people, like, in an ideal world, what do you see yourself doing in 3 years? So make it more than a 1 year resolution, but like, daydream with me a little bit. Like, what are you looking forward to? And they'll give me some vision, and then I say, "So what are you doing, like, in this next semester or this next whatever?" And, shorter amount of time. And I'm blown away by the amount of times that what people are doing with their life has nothing to do with what they envision doing in 3 years. So, it'd be
Mm,
like saying, um, "I would love to be a professional bull rider in 3 years, so I'm going to school for accounting." Like, that's what it sounds like to me of
right.
like, how in the world does the thing that you're actually spending your time doing have anything to do with what it is that you want to be? Now, sometimes people do have a very strategic laid out plan for that. This is not universal, but I'm surprised by a fair amount of time in which either people haven't thought about what they want to be doing in 3 years or have a plan or a vision, which I'm sort of sympathetic to because none of mine ever work out. But also, the amount of times in which we aren't really realistic about the practical steps that it would take to accomplish that goal. It just seems like there's something fundamentally broken about humanity with our ability to take lots of small steps to achieve a big goal. So, who the people that we celebrate who are really good at this? You know what we call them? Olympians.
How's that? Mhm.
I mean, so
Yeah.
we watch the Olympics for 3 weeks every 4 years, and we're like, wow, those people are great. Not thinking they've spent 8 to 10, 15 years getting ready for that
Mhm.
2 minutes that you watch them perform. I mean, so there are people out there who are phenomenal at saying, I'm willing to dedicate a massive amount of time to a very short performance because it's going to be a big thing. So it's not universal, but I would say by and large, for all the rest of us non heroes in the world, we struggle to achieve simple big goals because of our inability to stick with the small ones. Now,
And I think there's another
say
point.
something to that, and then I
Yeah.
have something else I want to add in.
All right. Well, I this threatens to take us. Well, this will just take us in the discipleship direction.
That's where I want to
So
go. Yep.
when you walk in, yeah, right. So if you walk into a gym and you want to, I mean, let's say you walk into a gym and you actually now have a realistic mindset. I'm going to have to. I can't out train a bad diet. I can't do this instantly. I will actually have to have a long term goal and put in the work and just grind for a while and think of long term health benefits. And I will have to work hard. But with the gym, you have a physical ideal. Most people do toward which they are working. The problem is, so that's physical. The gym is, I mean, there's there are a lot of spiritual benefits to a gym. I mean, I would say this. It's a very spiritual place for me in some ways. It's not a substitute for church or anything like that. It is for many people. It's worth acknowledging that. But I mean, it's a great place to practice consistency and discipline. There are numerous parallels with the spiritual life. All right. But that said, the ideal of the gym for most people is cosmetic. It's physical.
Hmm.
The problem is in our culture, we do not have a unified ideal of what makes a good person. There is
Yeah.
no consensus on that whatsoever. So a lot of us get and so adding to that is the crisis that a lot of people don't know what they want to be. They just know apparently I need to be something great. I don't know what. So many of us get secondhand from the culture what we want. Oh, so no, what you need to do is be beautiful, or you need to be rich, or you need to be an experience junkie, and you need to just gather up and you need to travel the globe, take in all of this experience. You need to be an influencer. You need to be known. People should know you. Your voice is so important. Other people should hear you. And so that contributes to some of the confusion, but as Christians, one of the beautiful, liberating aspects of a life set apart for Christ is that we have that ideal toward which we strive. And it's not some idea, it's not pie in the sky, it's not some notion, it's not a physique. It's nothing less than Jesus Christ. And we want to be like him, and we want to imitate him, and we want to follow his commands and become like him. So if that's the organizing principle of your life, you have a purpose and you have a drive and you have a focus that is deeply connected to your maker. Otherwise, you're on your own trying to figure out what you want and who you want to be with no real goalpost other than no, just whatever you want.
So let me tell a story on Cameron. So way back in the day, Cameron, when we were in our 20s, um, and we were becoming friends. I asked you this question. Do you remember this? I said, "Hey, Cameron, what are you looking forward to in life?" Do you remember this?
I do remember you asking. I don't remember how I answered you though.
Without skipping a beat, you said, "I'm looking forward to being holy,"
Hmm.
which also should have been an indication that maybe we were going to be friends. But because it was such a
Hmm.
unique, so it's not like I'm looking forward to being a brain surgeon. I'm looking forward to being holy. So it's interesting for a couple of reasons. One is because if your goal is to hunger and thirst for righteousness, then an interruption isn't really a problem. So then you have the Good Samaritan as an example. Then you have, and you fill in the teachings of Jesus. You can go Romans 8 for all you Presbyterians listening out there on the idea of being predestined for what? To be conformed to the image of the Son.
Hmm.
Um, then you suddenly do have a goal, and then you look at the life of Jesus, which was basically the definition of an interruption, every which way
Hmm.
possible.
Hmm.
And so when you start to change the It's not moving the goalpost. It's just saying, what are the, so, okay, what was the Good Samaritan's occupation? I don't know. It doesn't say. Like, that's not an important part of the story. That wasn't the defining characteristic of who he was. How much money
Mhm.
did he have? I don't know. Enough to pay for a guy to go to a hotel. That might mean he had a lot, or maybe he just gave what he had. What does, like, was he in good shape? I don't know. Did the good, was the Good Samaritan on a keto diet? I don't know. Like, just none of these things that Jesus praises him for had anything to do with any of the resolutions that we as a culture make.
Mhm.
So if you back up then and say, well, what are the actual goals? What are we actually striving for here? Then the inconveniences become part of our formation. And so what happens then
Right.
is on the discipleship part is y- so you have goal A, and then you see all the steps that need to happen to accomplish goal A. Let's say that God has goal B for you, which should be your plan A, but it's not. It's goal. And then God is going to put the things in your life to make goal B happen, which will always be considered an inconvenience to you while you're pursuing goal A. That's the Paul. It's hard for you to kick against the goads kind of thing. Um, and so,
Mhm.
is what happens in your life the thing that God thinks needs to be happening in order to shape and form you into who He wants you to be? If we could, I mean, that sounds good rolling off the lips, but if we could actually live into that, which I think is what the goal of discipleship is to say, Lord, what are you teaching me in this moment through this thing? Then we are becoming the type of person, the Good Samaritan, who is able to embrace the distraction as a wonderful thing. And in fact, a call of our Lord without any of the other interesting things that we actually don't really care about in life being the main defining moments of our lives. So, um, that is a very complex way to ask the question about how to begin the new year. But I think it's helpful for me to always step back, recontextualize, say, what are the actual goals here? Who plans the actual goals? And then it's just like having a trainer or a coach and everything else. It's always wise if you let the coach or the trainer be the one who facilitates what you need in your life in order to grow in the direction that they see you have room to improve in rather than to try to make it up on your own. So that's a both and to the I'm not anti the idea of resolutions. I've made a lot of weird resolutions and kept them over the years. Um, but I think we want to be careful about making sure that it isn't guided by selfish ambition and that we're not trying to uh, you know, organize our lives and not allow the Lord to direct our steps along the way. And then if we get in the right framework, then the chaos of the lives that we live are part of the formation of who it is that we're supposed to be for God's glory and for our neighbor's good. And we do that with a deeper level of satisfaction and joy rather than the irritation when our own plans don't come to fruition. You've been listening to Thinking Out Loud, a podcast where we think out loud about current events and Christian hope.
Thanks for listening to Thinking Out Loud. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, book Nathan or Cameron, or if you'd like to support us financially, whether through a one-time donation or on a monthly basis, you can do so on the donate page at www.toltogether.com. That's toltogether.com. And please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and sharing this content with your friends. It really does help.